hope will help me understand the conceptual apparatus you're developing. So one of the things that I love the most about Aberrations in Black is your development of the critique of the disciplines, of sociology and literature specifically, but of disciplines in general. And so I would like to understand better how you're engaging with philosophy. Are you hoping for a similar kind of critique of the discipline of philosophy? And I'm especially really fascinated by your evocation of Hume, which reaches back to something that I would never think to reach back to in talking about contemporary queer formations. And when you first said this, I thought you were going to offer association as an alternative term to race, class, gender, and nation, and so on. Then you did something very different with it in relation to nation, and then later you did something very different with it by placing it as part of a list that included affect, and I can't remember what else, but it was not in the list alongside other categories of identification. It was alongside a list of other ways of being in the world that we don't think of as, the social categories that most order hierarchy. And the other little piece I would like you to put in there, please, is your relationship to Deleuze. So you use the concept of the desiring machine a couple times in Ordized subject formations. Our desiring machine's revolution is a desiring machine. And I see in this analysis of a party an echo of the analysis of race at parties of your former colleague at Minnesota, Arun Saldana, and his use of the concept of the stickiness of race that dominates even a kind of, he doesn't use the concept of heterotopic, right, but dominates even a heterotopic space, or an idea, a space that some people would like to see as utopian, but you're very correctly pointing out is really riven. So anyway, I'd love to just understand how you're using all these concepts.
Sure. So like philosophy, associations, and Hume.
The list. Stickiness.
Stickiness. What? You can tell. In terms of philosophy, yes, right? I kind of see part of what I'm trying to do, that last line in the paper, sexuality being rumination, continuation, deliberation on politics. That's actually a riff off of Althusser's chapter for Lenin. I think, no. What's the book called? Lenin? Anyway, something with Lenin in the title. It's the one that has ideology and state apparatus. But anyway, so he says that, So he says that, labor, philosophy is the continuation, rumination, deliberation of politics, right? Because he's trying to, sort of produce a kind of materialist account and also theory of philosophy. So, there are a couple of things I'm trying to do there, and that is to sort of mark the sort of philosophical, production, or mark, sort of Black queer sexualities as a philosophical production. One, but also two, trying to, like I did in Aberrations in Black, attach the history of sexuality to a history of materialist analytics. Okay? In terms of the discipline of philosophy as it is now, philosophy's changed so much. I'm not even sure I'm interested in its disciplinary incarnation now. Because I am one of those folks who thinks that, what philosophy used to do is now being done in the humanities. Like in lit and cultural studies, in interdisciplinary fields. So I don't know if sort of philosophy, in terms of the day-to-day operations of philosophers in departments of philosophy. I did try to do that with sociology, right? But philosophy is so quantitative at this point. I'm not interested. I think I am interested in that part of the philosophical enterprise that's taken up by social theorists, right? Because those folks have, one, retained the old sense of philosophy in the good and the bad, you know, and that is a sort of reproduction of a kind of Eurocentrism that has no regard for minoritized subjects, particularly people of color, as epistemological subjects, you know. So associations, you know, I have been interested in, you know, the way in which, you know, kind of radicals think for a long time. And I've been trying to find, you know, I did a piece called the Lateral Maneuvers of African American Studies in the Period of Migration. That, you know, was my first attempt to sort of figure out, where does this come from? And then I remembered, oh, duh, you know, it partly comes from Hume. I read Hume as a sophomore, you know, at Howard University in a philosophy course. And, you know, so I reread Hume, you know, for this thing. And, you know, we usually associate Hume with the sort of, you know, the founder of empiricism, you know, as the one who, you know, propels something like the social sciences, or even sort of like the sort of empirical bent of history to look for facts and, you know, see experience as a sort of objective thing that can be measured, blah, blah, blah. But nobody really talked about, or talks about Hume as in connection with the formation of the citizen subject, you know? And also, no one reads Hume as a kind of allegory of the birth of modern, i.e. national thought. And, you know, now that I'm doing it, I'm kind of surprised that like no one else is doing this, because it's so obvious, you know, in many ways. Like, you know, in a treatise on human understanding, like he has a whole thing about like identity, you know, and its relationship to the association and relationship to the principles of association, right? You know, and like, you know, I'm just surprised that so few people have done the kind of genealogical work to think about Hume not simply as the father of empiricism, but also as the person who, you know, really kind of codified how the mind was supposed to work in the service of the nation. You know, other folks who I'm going to, or will go to in the writing, I'm sort of teaching them now. You know, Plato, Machiavelli, you know, Aristotle, and I must be talking on blanking on like the happy philosopher. Still another name. You know, and so, you know, so for me, it's, you know, part of what you're pointing to is, you know, the association as a sort of a category that has a lot of potential in terms of liberatory politics, but also has a very shady history, right? You know, around nationalist thought, right? And it's precisely that stickiness, messiness that I'm interested in, right? You know, so, you know, in what ways, you know, are these subjects, you know, trying to sort of maneuver and remaneuver something like the associations for radical ends, you know, rather than the associations that are sanctioned by a government at a particular time. Pay attention, for instance, to the way that Angela Davis thinks, or the way that Jackie Alexander thinks, or Chandra Mohanty, right? And you see what I'm talking about, right? That, you know, part of what has always been attractive to me about their minds is, you know, that they can produce a whole kind of topography, you know, of struggles, you know, that are related, right? And then, so the associations are a way for me to kind of get at, how did that mind come into being? Okay? Deleuze, you know, in terms of, I'm using a particular Deleuze, right? Like, you know, it's the part where Deleuze and Roderick and anti-Oedipus make the, you know, sort of theorized desire as not simply something that is transgressive, but also something that is socially reproductive, right? So they both say that, like, you know, fascism is a desiring machine, you know, as well as the, you know, more transgressive formations. Part of what I want to do there is to kind of interrupt, you know, this presumption that a desiring machine is always a kind of transgressive force, you know, and to sort of observe its messiness, like with the associations. So the question isn't about like, well, you know, if you have queer desires, then that will automatically yield, you know, sort of transgressions. No. In what way is the desire machine called queer desires being maneuvered? You know? So yeah, so that's it.